Hi, and welcome back to um, Management Information Systems. This is Mary Jo Black. We're going to be talking about Module 5 for Excel 2016. This gets into some more interesting functions that you're going to be using. Some of the things you're going to be doing is format data using text functions, summa data based on ranges and conditions, consolidating data using a formula, checking formulas for errors, constructing formulas using named ranges, building logical formulas with if functions, and building logical formulas with and functions, and to calculate payments with the PMT function. So there is a way to convert text to columns. You can break data into fields or into multiple columns. And the way you do that is by capitalizing the first letter of a text string. The other way is to concatenate or join two or more text strings. So let's take a look at a worksheet with data separated into columns. So if you take a look, the way that they separated this data into columns is by using what's called a delimiter. So they used a comma, and what that did was that enabled them to be able to separate these items into columns. Here's another example of a worksheet that has columns that are formatted and the data for the columns being formatted using that comma delimiter. So you can use text functions, which we talked about a few minutes ago. Upper function converts text to all uppercase letters. Lower, that function converts text to all lowercase letters. Substitute function replaces the text in a text string. So you may substitute one item for another item. We used that when we made a change to our existing Madison College domain name. Instead of matcmadison.edu, we went to madisoncollege.edu, and we used that substitute function. A delimiter is a separator such as a space, comma, or semicolon that is used to separate data. And I talked about that in the last couple of slides. That was used in order to put different data into different columns. There are also text functions that you can use like right, left, and mid, which means right justified, left justified, middle. So I'm trying to slow down a little bit. Be sure to look at this video again if you have questions. I also have some additional things that I've added to the course itself in week 3 so that you can take a look at additional supplemental information that can help you with some of this stuff. There is a function that's called SUMIF, and what happens is it will total the cells in a range if it meets a certain criteria. So it's not going to do that. It's only going to do that if it meets the criteria. That's the thing you need to remember. The COUNTIF function does the same thing. It will count the cells in a range you choose, but it will do that based on a specified condition. An average if averages the cells in a range based again on that certain condition. So the if function is interesting. It will do something if it meets the criteria, and it won't do something if it does not meet the criteria. So here's an example of the COUNTIF function. If you take a look, this is the area right here that's been highlighted, and it says COUNTIF, and this is an absolute value, A6 through A25 F7. So what it's doing is it says, okay, this is what I want you to do. You can count it if A6 through A25 equal F7. And that's interesting because, again, what you're doing is you are saying you can only count these numbers if this criteria meets the condition. So here's some more data ranges based on condition. There's the today, and if you take a look, if you want to use the today function, this is an example of what it looks like typed into that formula bar. There's now, date, time, year. Oops, let me go back so you can see the rest of them. There's hour, minute. These are things that you will find help you, especially if you want to set conditions that have to do with time. So you can also consolidate data into one worksheet. So you have different sheets or different workbooks. That particular consolidation can happen when you bring those workbooks together and consolidate that data. So what you would be doing is referencing, or you can link to other data in other worksheets or other workbooks. So here's an example of what is being done. So you're taking information from one worksheet that has NY January, and it also has, and I'm trying to read this correctly, LA January, and it's summarizing it in one worksheet. So you're actually making a reference to another worksheet when you're consolidating data. You can link workbooks so that the changes made in reference cells in one workbook are reflected in the consolidation in another workbook. To link the cells between the workbooks, you need to have the workbooks open. You select the cell you want to have receive the linked data, and then what you do is you type the equal sign, and then you select the cell in the workbook containing the data to be linked, and then you press enter. I know it sounds simple, and once you do it a couple of times, you'll understand how it works. So what you're doing again is you're selecting you're selecting the cell to receive the linked data, and you're typing the equal sign, and then you're going to the other workbook containing the data to be linked, and you're clicking on it and then pressing enter. So another thing you can do is check formulas for errors, and here are some of the error messages that you can get and what they mean. A lot of times developers or people that are working with spreadsheets or data will actually Google this information to find out what the error message means. But if you take a look at this sheet, this basically tells you what that means in Microsoft Excel when you receive that message. One that you see a lot of times if you don't have the column open long or large enough is this this hashtag that keeps going on, and once you open up that column to be long enough to receive that data, then it'll go away. Okay, so here's an example of a worksheet with some error codes. So there's an issue with something that's in that sheet, and you just have to work through the problem and try to figure out why it's turning up wrong. Unfortunately, one of the things that happens is sometimes it takes a little bit of work to figure out why you're getting that error message. You guys have probably all heard of this. It's called a circular reference. So what that is meaning is that it contains a formula that refers to its own cell location. So you might accidentally enter a formula with a circular reference and get that warning box. If it's intentional, you can enable it, an iteration feature, so that you don't get that circular reference, but in most cases the circular reference is an error, and you have to figure out what error you made in the formula that you have. You can construct formulas using name ranges too. You can assign names to cells and ranges. It can make the worksheet easier to follow, and it can, like, you can name formulas, and that helps to reduce that formula error. You can define a scope. I'm sure all of you have heard of that before. It's the name for a cell or a range of cells, and worksheets where it can be used. When you use names, they become absolute cell references by default, just so you know that. And it actually works pretty well when you do use names again. Use the name manager to create, delete, and edit names in a worksheet. So this can become kind of like a shortcut that you can use when you're trying to work with multiple workbooks or worksheets, and you need to go from one to the other. Those names can be really effective. Here's a look at that name manager dialog box. And what you're doing is you're saying, okay, this is the name I want to give it. This is the scope. I want to use the workbook, and this is what it refers to. And what you do is it says, okay, you decide what that particular name is referring to, and then you can use it in your formula to again create that shortcut to make your make it easier for you to work. So if you take a look at this particular worksheet, what they're doing is they've given the data range here a name, which is equal to experience underscore date hyphen current underscore date. That's kind of cool because they know every time you use that, it means that that's the particular range of data that you want to use. Logical formulas can make calculations based on conditions. And what they use is they use a test to find out if it meets that condition. So there are three parts to an if function. A logical test or condition, so do this if this occurs. An action if the result of the logical test is true, and an action if it's not true. Some of the things that you may use in an if function are called operators. So if you take a look below, the operator like greater than, right here, less than, equal to, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, or not equal to. Those would be examples of operators. Here's an example of an if function. So it says in the equation here, and you can kind of follow along. Oops, let me go back so that you can see this. It says if D7, so if we take a look at D7, if D7 is greater than E7, so D7 is greater than E7, then you take and perform the calculation D7 minus E7. And in this case, D7 is greater than E7 so that you can do the calculation. If it's not correct, you put none in the field. So if D7 was greater than E7, then the word none would appear here. You can build a logical formula with the AND function. AND arguments are true if the logical tests are true. It's false if the logical tests are false. So you have to have one thing that's true and the other thing is true. If one of them is false, then it fails. Here's an example of the AND function. F7 is not equal to, then put none. If